Today I'm going to talk about another one of the questions we get quite frequently, which is, do you have foreign teachers? Or are your teachers native speakers? More often than not, the question is, do you have foreign teachers? So to start that question, I think it is important to think about what is an English teacher, especially in the sense of what is it that we look for in an English teacher. So we look predominantly at three things. Is the person proficient in English? So throughout the video, if I talk about teacher in terms of being proficient, I don't care where they grew up, where they were born. I am concerned about how good is their English ability. So we're not comparing teachers who can speak a little bit of English and they're teaching a little bit of English in an elementary school with other teachers. We're looking at teachers that are completely proficient. So they are good at writing English, whether that be academic English or things a bit more general. Their speaking, listening and reading ability is basically advanced or completely proficient. The second thing we look at is, does the person have the ability to analyze language? By that we mean if they're looking at a piece of writing, not just to know, oh, this is wrong, but to also know why it's wrong, and perhaps how they can help a student fix that mistake or fix that error. Or to look at a piece of writing and going, there are no grammar mistakes, there are no vocabulary mistakes, but it needs to be written in a different way to really communicate the message. And the third thing that we look at is pedagogy. Can the person teach, and do they understand how languages are learned? Now, proficiency very often, if you are a native speaker, that isn't a problem. But there's no reason why somebody that is not a native speaker cannot become completely proficient in any language. I mean, that is really the purpose for some people of why they learn an additional language. The idea of being able to analyze language, or the pedagogy, how to teach it, basically comes from two things. One, qualifications, and two, experience. I'm going to talk about qualifications first because I think that it's very important to address this. If you Google or if you look online, there are lots of TESOL or TEFL qualifications. These are qualifications, or so-called qualifications at least, where you get a certificate that makes you a teacher of English as a foreign language, or a teacher of English as a second language, or a teacher of English as to speakers of other languages. The problem with these TESOL qualifications is that they're very often very, very cheap, and they are extremely poorly regulated. In fact, they are completely unregulated, which means there's no control over the quality. So one of the things that are important is to know which qualifications you can trust, and there's a few things that we look at. We need to know who the tutor is, and that the tutor has been standardized by an organization that follows good principles. We need to be sure that the awarding body of that qualification isn't the center where you did it, because what happens is you pay $200 or $300 to an online company, you do the work, and they give you the certificate. So the certificate shouldn't come from the place where you did the training. If you look at a university, for example, although the university issues the qualification, they actually get permission from the government where they are based to issue qualifications. So universities cannot just suddenly decide they're going to run medical degrees or dentistry degrees. The government has to approve it. And then the other thing that we look at is there teaching practice? Are you actually observed in the classroom teaching? And it's the person that's observing you, somebody that knows what they're talking about, and that the qualification has value. Now for us, the two main qualifications that we look at is the Cambridge CELTA or the Trinity College of London Certificate in TESOL or Cert TESOL. We only look at these two because they are the only two currently that we are 100% certain that meets all the criteria that we're looking for. Now the idea of qualifications is important because you wouldn't go to a doctor if the doctor isn't a qualified doctor, and you wouldn't go to a dentist if the dentist isn't a qualified dentist. You wouldn't, if you're sick, go to see somebody whose father and grandfather was a doctor, but this person isn't a doctor. And you should have the same level of requirements, I think, if you're looking at who's a teacher, especially if that person is going to teach you because you have certain goals, or if you're putting your children in a class with that person so that they can learn English. Now, in terms of experience, the issue with experience is that you could, if you don't have any qualifications and you're not getting proper feedback, you could be doing things that are bad for language learning for 20 years and say, I have 20 years experience, but there's 20 years experience that's completely worthless. I think an important question to ask if you are a parent or a person looking to learn English is, can the teacher with the qualification that they have work at the British Council? Can this teacher become an IELTS examiner? Can this teacher, with the qualification that they have, work in places like Australia or New Zealand? And if they can't, the qualification is useless. Now you still get people to say, but I want a native speaker. So the first thing that I think is important to think about is, what is a native speaker? And in essence, it's purely where you're born, and more often than not, it means a person whose skin is white. And that is quite discriminatory if you consider how hard local teachers, at least some of them, have worked getting themselves properly qualified and making sure that they have very, very high level of English. I personally have a very, very good friend who's a manager at a very, very, very good school. He's got a master's degree from a university in Australia, and he actually taught in Australia for 6 years, but he is Taiwanese. And he is significantly better as a teacher than a lot of other teachers that I've seen teach who are native speakers. The main difference being that one is qualified and the other is not. And the sad thing is that people who want their kids to get good at English would not pick the qualified good teacher, but they pick the teacher they perceive as a native speaker. And I'm going to end with a little question, I think, if, for lack of a better way of phrasing it. If you're sitting in front of me with your child and you say you want a native speaker, I want you to think about how good is it that you really want your child to be at English. And I'm hoping you'd say, very good. Would you like your child to be good enough at English that they can become a very, very good English teacher? And you'd more than likely say, yes. And then my question to you is, if your child is sitting right next to you at the beginning of their English language learning journey, and you're saying, you need to work hard, you need to memorize vocabulary, sometimes it's going to be fun, sometimes it's going to be very, very difficult, but you will never be good enough because you were not born in a country where people speak English and your skin isn't white. Do you think that is the right message to give your child right at the beginning of their learning journey? I don't think it is, and I think if we can shift our thinking towards value teachers and their qualifications as much as we value doctors and their qualifications, that we'll be getting much better results with our children and for ourselves.